welcome to the DevReady Podcast, where we're helping non-techs build great tech. Today we've got an interesting podcast with entrepreneur that's moved to acquisition and purchasing small to medium businesses across everything outside tech, but started in the world of things like Openpay, so really tech backgrounds, had some exits, I'm assuming, and then he's gone through to other businesses, runs a dev company as well. So it should be a very interesting conversation around a number of different areas. Michael Bronfman, thank you for joining us today.
Andrew, thanks so much for having me, and congrats on your success today. And looking forward to sharing my knowledge to your audience.
No, thank you, Michael. Really appreciate it, mate. Um, just firstly, tell us who Michael is. Let's talk a little bit about that. And who are you, Michael?
Sure. So I guess at heart, I guess I'm an entrepreneur. I always have been through and through in terms of trying to just navigate through the business world. Interestingly enough, I do have a degree, so I went through the university pathway early on, predominantly in the medical space. And then I
Okay.
recognized that I was sort of, probably better in the sales side of things, and essentially, naturally got into the startup ecosystem. And that's through founding a booking platform in the beauty industry when I was about 18. Um, and that got taken over by Zomato, a company out of India, which is a pretty well-known
Mhm.
business, when I was about 22. And then I got introduced to Openpay, which was a buy now, pay later product. And at the
Mhm.
time, the industry didn't exist. So I was sort of number three in that business. We commercialized the business, took it to about 250 employees in 2.5 years, listed the
Well,
business on the
huge
Australian
growth.
Stock Exchange.
Mm.
So that was a huge learning curve. And then I shifted my focus from startups to more business acquisition.
Mhm.
The reason being is because I just find that now more so than before, it's critical to look at two things. Number one is profitability, and number two, I find that it's easier to acquire an existing business that's traditionally been doing well over a longer period of time, that is under management and it's got good people in it. And that's sort of what my focus has been over the past 2 years and probably will be over the next 10.
A little bit to unpack there. So let's get back to 18-year-old Michael that went and started a beauty on booking system. How did
Yeah.
that come about? Where did that start? At that age, people are just not doing much generally. So
Yeah.
how did you get into
Yeah.
that to begin with?
Interesting story. So I've always been a 7 day a week type of guy. So, I got my
Mhm.
first job when I was 14 and 9 months, as you would, legal age. I worked, funnily enough, my first ever job was at KFC. I very quickly realized that it wasn't for
I was
me
at
when
Macca's.
yeah, there you go. I
Yeah,
think we all go through
yeah.
that journey.
We do go through that journey. We might do,
Quickly,
yeah. Yeah.
quickly realized within about a month I got fired because I broke someone's tooth by putting the wrong product in the bun.
Oh,
So they
wow.
bit into a bone. And
Oh.
so I quickly realized, yeah, I should probably not be working here. Anyway, I got a job at Optus, probably I was about 16 at the time. And that was my first exposure to sales. While I was doing that, I was at school, obviously. I finished school.
Yeah.
Then I went, coming from a Jewish background, I always, either
Yeah.
a doctor or a lawyer. So
Yes.
I then thought I'd want to be a heart surgeon. So I didn't get the marks. So I ended up doing a nursing and paramedic degree, so double
Mm-hmm.
degree.
Yep.
Um, and whilst I was doing that, I was working at Telstra doing enterprise and government sales, and very quickly realized that I was good at sales through, getting the best results in the country across Telstra, doing 3 days a week. Um, well, I was about 18 at the time. Um, which was pretty crazy. And then um, what frustrated me the most in Melbourne CBD, when on my
Yeah.
lunch break, when I wanted to go get a haircut, which we had half an hour lunch break, there were two
Mm-hmm.
options. One was you either call up, which half the time the barber doesn't answer, which, the salon, or the other option is you go downstairs and hope that you find an appointment in time.
Mm-hmm.
Long story short, that was way too fragmented. So I was working at Telstra doing enterprise
Yeah.
and government sales, and on my lunch break,
Mm-hmm.
when I wanted to go get a haircut, in my
Mm-hmm.
30-minute lunch break, there were two options. One, you either call up, which half the time they didn't answer, the salon,
Yeah.
or the other one, you walk downstairs and hope that you get a time. But unfortunately, that was way too fragmented. I had a contact at Telstra who had some contacts in India. and we ended up developing a booking platform in the beauty industry. Um, Very quickly learned a lesson that, you know, just be careful with who you partner with.
Of course.
We ended up forcefully selling the business to Zomato, which was my first ever exit. It wasn't a good
Okay.
exit,
Yeah.
but it was something.
Hmm.
Um, and
What did
then,
that
uh,
teach you at the time? What did you learn
uh,
from that
yeah,
experience?
you know, when you're young, I mean, like
Mm.
I'm 33 now, like you're always hungry, right?
Mhm.
But I've learned in the past 5 years to take my time with things, get to know people better. Um,
Mm.
don't get married before you get into bed, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Um, and so it was a lesson in that, I guess.
Hmm.
And then obviously everything I did after that became lessons, and whether it was a bad one, it was a good mistake, whatever, they're all lessons, right? So, and that's the way I've been looking at things.
Hmm.
Yeah, obviously from that perspective, like it was great to get exposure to the business space. Um, and I didn't know it was made for me, but then when I started getting into it, I felt like, well, this is interesting.
So it's something there. In terms of business, everything's a learning experience. You never do everything right. There's no, that's the reality. And you're always at your edge. Like you're always doing something new if you're pushing boundary. Otherwise, you're in your comfort zone, and you're effectively going nowhere fast. So if you're looking to grow and evolve, you really don't know what you're walking into. That's the reality of what it is.
That's
So
right.
interesting how you started so young. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you now
Mm.
realize, it's like there's always something fancier and shinier, and I think you just got to be comfortable with the long haul.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, the longer you can last in business, the longer you can stick to the one thing, the probably better you're going to do.
Fair, because if you jump to jump to jump, yeah, I think having a base is really good. A base of cash flow, income, profitability. If you can get to that point, you can
It
experiment.
helps you.
You can't get to that, you're just hopping. I think I find it interesting the world of startup, and you work with quite a few of them. They will try something for 6 months and then they go off. The reality is nothing's going to happen in 6 months. It's quite rare to find hit the market, hit product market fit in 6 months and be generating revenue. It's very rare to have that. Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. So I think like my hats off to anyone that starts a startup, and it's a very stressful environment, but it's a great one once you are very passionate about a problem you're solving and you can really take it
Mhm.
to where it needs to go. So I think
Yeah.
from that perspective, obviously the success rate's a lot lower. But
Mhm.
in saying that, if you've got the guts and you've got what it takes, especially while you're younger, I think you've got time to recover with things.
Mm.
So I always encourage people to try the earlier the better, in
Mhm.
some respect, because obviously you've got less responsibility, you've got less to lose, you've got more focus and attention time, like time's on your side, right? So
Mhm.
obviously that's a big lesson that I've learned over time.
For those that are 40, different scenario. But I'm similar. I
Yeah.
started business at 22, not 18, but 22. A little bit different,
Still
but
young,
still young.
very young.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
the challenge I found was it was for me the first 5 years was just I was having fun in business. I didn't really take it from business. I just live life and enjoyed what it was. And then I got a bit more serious as I was back into coming to 30. Okay, I need to really push in and hone in. So it depends on what your outcomes and what you want to achieve was. I was just enjoying the lifestyle during that the 20s. So, but then family evolves and then things change. So it depends how you take it. But I agree, responsibility's less. There's no one that's relying on you. You're probably pretty independent in your 20s. You can try things. It's a good time to take a risk for sure.
I agree. Yeah, and I agree with you completely.
So let's jump on. Very cool to see that you got an exit, even though it may not have been what you expected, but that's what happened and you learnt something from it. What's your biggest takeaway from that experience?
Look, my biggest takeaway, I think, was how critical it is to bring complementary skills to the table.
Mm.
Um, and what I mean by that is, just understanding as quickly as possible what you're good at, double down on that, and then filling in the gaps with the right people.
Hmm.
Obviously, that was a major lesson, number one. Number
Yep.
two was, again, be careful who you partner with and really understand. who you're partnering with, and making sure that the mindset and the hunger is there, because that's number one. Skills
Hmm.
you can teach, right? Um, and so obviously it's nice to be able to buy time by bringing people with experience, because you're buying their experience. But at the same token, if they don't have the mindset, it's very challenging. So finding people that are like-minded, that are very hungry, that won't give up at any cost just as much as you wouldn't, is difficult to find, right?
There's a tool that I used in business. I picked it up probably about 6, 7 years ago. It's called Wealth Dynamics. I find that it's like a survey, right? And you got everyone around a wheel, and then you have sales guys will be star creators. So if you're in the world of sales, you're probably in that space where you're effectively looking. You like to get out there. You like to talk about the business. You like to promote it. Great people that generally are in team and manage team are in the supporter category. So there's a supporter category. And if you want someone to manage the day to day, they're sort of in the accumulator lord spit where they basically will manage. So I found that quite fascinating, and I ran it through the business and changed the dynamic of our people and said, okay, you're here. Would you like to do some of this? And then I got some other people in project management, some other people in just quality control. So it actually impacted, and people felt happy about what they did. If you can get people in the space of what they enjoy doing and they're filling a gap for the organization, then you're on the winner. But like you said, you need complementary skill sets. If you don't have that, everyone's doing the same thing and no one's being able to deliver what a business really needs, which is sales, operations, marketing, digging into detail. Some people just networking communicators. So there's a lot of different variety that we need in
I like
business.
that. Yeah, I completely agree. Couldn't agree more. I think, yeah, that's the thing. Your business is nothing without your people.
Correct. Yeah.
And your people are like, they make the business, right? So
100%. Now, very good learning to take from that in terms of get complementary skills around you. That went into Openpay, right? So how did that move on? Did you meet some people during that first business? Because sometimes that's usually how it works. Yeah.
yeah, no, so I had a
Yeah.
contact from
Yeah.
overseas that was brought here by a very high net worth family to commercialize a reverse lay-by concept at the time.
Okay.
And we
Yeah.
got together just to talk about some business ideas that I had, and I wanted to start a
Hmm.
medical distribution company. And
Hmm.
we spoke over lunch, and he said, "Look, I don't
Yeah.
have the right network for you that you need," because his background, he was a CEO of a company with 50,000 employees. It was
Yeah.
very
S-
influential. He was in his
mm,
50s. I was, probably 22 at the time.
mhm,
And he said, look, this high net worth family brought me here to
mm,
commercialize this reverse lay-by concept.
mm,
Because overseas you were able to go into a store and buy something, put it on lay-by, but walk away today.
mhm.
So essentially to reverse lay-by,
Get the product, but you can walk away. Yeah.
yeah, and pay over time. And
Hmm.
in Australia, you never had that.
Mm,
So he said, look, we're going to test it across their retail chain and see how it goes. We think we've got an opportunity in the healthcare market. You've got a bit of experience in medical. At that time, I had a lot of contacts in the medical space for medical sales and stuff. I had a short stint in that
okay.
space.
Yeah.
And he said, what do you think? And I said, look, I'm not interested. I want to start my own thing, blah, blah, blah. And because of the caliber of person he was, he said, look, why don't you present to us what you think is the opportunity for us? And I had a meeting with the board, which was very influential board, which I didn't know at the time, but pretty much the top five families were in this boardroom.
Mm,
Um, and we literally, I pitched them what I thought was the opportunity, and they didn't let me walk out of the boardroom till we had a deal on the table. So I literally started the next day as like number three in the business, and it
yeah.
was a wild ride, roller coaster. And we literally paved the way along with Afterpay and Zip in terms of the Afterpay buy now pay later journey, which was
Mm.
an absolutely phenomenal ride, and I learned a lot through. Like that, probably learned the most amount through that journey in terms of business and from the right people.
Being around a good network of people can set you forward in the business journey by 20, 30 years. Having the right advisors around you, the right people to learn from. Because learning on your own accord, you can waste 10 years quite simply. And it's quite easy to do that in business. Tell me what that experience was like from number three to, I think you mentioned 250 people by the time you, in a couple of years, that exponential growth. Not everyone experiences it, but what is that really like? That is the whole startup journey's um, holy grail of growth, right?
Like, I mean, it's one in a lifetime sort of
Mm,
opportunity. I mean, majority of people won't experience such growth, and it's like one of those
mhm,
things where when you experience it, it's just an absolute roller coaster.
yeah,
Um, we had, like I said, very influential people involved in the business.
mhm,
We moved at a high velocity, long days, 24-hour days, and it was all about how do we grow while maintaining the business. So you always, as you know, with startups, right, you're
mhm,
raising capital a lot of the time, and it's the balance of raising enough capital to the balance of running the business to grow it. At the time it was growth at all costs, and growth at all costs 4 years ago was fine, whereas now it's all about profitability, especially with the financial market. So at the time we were growing and growing and growing and growing and growing, and it was all focused on how do we hire enough people.
yeah, just to keep it churning and keep the revenue growing, more sales. So it's really revenue based growth. It's profitability. How did that come into the conversation, or did it come in at all?
But it was at the point that I was there, it was never profitable as such.
Never. Yeah. Okay.
But like your
Yeah.
Uber and Airbnbs, they were never. Up to a certain
Yeah.
point.
Mm,
But in saying that, we had a good amount of money coming in to be able to grow the business, number one.
hmm.
Number two, we
Yep.
had a pathway to profitability.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, we brought like really, really, really experienced, good people to the table with the right inputs, to be able to take
Hmm.
the business to where it needed to go. And that was great.
Yeah.
Um, so I left the business about a year and a half or so before we went into liquidation, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It was not in the fault of any of the management or leadership team. It was just an unfortunate investor situation that happened, and obviously
Mhm.
the business will move in the right direction. And as you know, the industry was obviously
What year was this roughly that it sort of went into liquid?
maybe 2021, something like that.
Okay, just COVID period. Yep, just
Yeah, it
after.
was just after, I
Yeah.
think,
Okay.
COVID.
Yep.
Um, and
Mm,
like, I mean, it wasn't COVID. It was just, like I said, it was
yeah.
just greed.
Okay.
So that's unfortunate. But like at the end of the day,
Mm.
also don't forget that the buy now pay later industry today is not what it was when it was hot.
No, it's evolved. There's so much competition. It's flattened out. The investment into that space has fizzled out. It's shifted into a new dynamic of AI, really. Yeah, so that's what's happened. Yeah.
So we got started before the industry even existed. So we sort of paved the way with the industry with Afterpay and Zip, and it was a phenomenal journey. It was exciting ride, and learned a lot through that process. Um, Very much opens your eyes in terms of like what high velocity growth is like, and what some of those tech unicorns. I mean, we got like an inch to $1 billion business, right? In 2 years. So it
Yeah,
was
wow.
just like it was pretty
Almost.
crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy growth, isn't it? Was it
Mm.
mostly engineers, mostly sales guys, bit of a mix? How did it come together in terms of structure?
Yeah, we had a lot of developers. I would probably say about 40 to 50% of our team was on the tech support stuff. And then the rest would have been on growth slash marketing slash operations. And that was really sort of how we structured it. We then, obviously, to list the business, we had to have some corporate governance in place, and we put, chief executives into each seat and the relevant parties. And it became from like a very low hierarchy to all of a sudden corporatized.
In a quick amount of time is probably difficult to manage. How was that experience?
Was crazy. Oh, I mean, we had a HR team of about like
Yeah.
we got to a point where we had chief of culture and people, and then we had a head of HR, and then we had like probably about 5 or 6 people hiring on a daily basis, full time. So we were hiring like 10 people a week. It was just insane.
That's a hard dynamic, I think, to go from three
Mm.
people. to
mm,
HR, corporate governance coming
mm.
in a space of 2 years.
It
I
was
think,
crazy.
how did you feel that business went managing that change? Because that's 10, 15 year change compressed into 1 to 2 year time frame, really.
Yeah. Look, I think it came down to again bringing the right people. I think was
Hmm.
critical,
Yep.
who have a lot of know-how and who have a lot of experience to be able to really, turn the wheels as quickly as possible. And that was obviously a challenge, finding those people. But at the same time, I mean, when you've got a business that's growing exponentially in a very hot market, people are attracted to,
They would
jumping
be
on board.
attracted to that. Yeah,
Yeah, I
correct.
mean, I mean, 4 years ago, like if we talked about, hey, would you join Afterpay? I think majority of people would be like, it's like joining Google, yeah. So,
Yeah.
at the time, if
Mm.
that makes sense. So,
Hmm.
yeah, look, the business obviously attracted a lot of people and high caliber. And I
Yeah.
remember one of our first hires in marketing was, early stage with Uber. When Uber was going from sort of no people to a ginormous business, and so.
So
You know,
had
I
that
think bringing,
experience of growth
yeah,
and
exactly.
scale.
So those
Mm.
people bring in what they've learnt, and obviously that helped the business as well.
At the time, you mentioned you moved on before the business didn't
Hmm.
went into liquidation. What was the reasoning for moving on? Was it burnout, change of
Uh,
direction? What did it
it
sort
was
of come
more,
to for you?
yeah. Look, I think it was the change in direction, but also opportunity cost. I had a few opportunities at the time, and I sort of
Hmm.
did what I needed to do, and I moved on. That's basically what
Yeah.
happened.
Okay.
In saying that, like I have a number of ventures with some of the leaders of that business. It's very clear that like good people stay together, and
Mm.
I think one of the biggest takeaways from that journey was being able to I guess hold on to those connections, and um,
Hmm.
having evolved into bigger and greater things, which has been good for us. So yeah.
Oh, the network is something you can take forever, and the
Mm,
people around you and who you learnt from and who
mm,
you've actually brought on that journey and who you've been to war with, and
mm,
that's the reality. Who you're
mm.
actually working with to strive for new growth, and you create awesome relationships when you're in business,
Yeah,
good, bad,
agreed.
and indifferent. Sometimes you can create some terrible relationships depending on how it works,
Mm,
because there's all these different personalities and
mm,
egos around business. But those ones that are tight and you've got a good connection, especially those complementary people, is
yeah,
really where it might sit. And so, okay, they're great at that. I'll let them do that. If I can trust them to achieve that outcome, we can all go
yeah,
and grow together. So it's good to
agreed.
build that network together.
Agreed. And I think as long as you do the right thing by people, people will
Correct.
remember you for that. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, if you're good at what you do, right,
Mm.
people will remember you for that. Um, and they'll always, from that, obviously, off the back of that, there's opportunities that come about.
Of course. Oh, there's lots of opportunity in the world. It's how we execute, and we can't execute alone. We need good people around us to execute. There's a million and one
Exactly.
opportunities out there and things that we could do. It's just how do we execute? But
Exactly.
need people to execute right. That's really
Yeah.
interesting, fascinating story. I could talk an hour about that.
I
I
know.
won't. We'll jump onto acquisitions because I know that's where you've moved on to. So someone's that's starting out, that's the high growth unicorn technically, which is what you
Yeah.
were a part of there. Probably didn't get to the final point of what a unicorn is, but that
Yeah.
scale and growth is really what drives it to that point.
Yeah.
What changed the dynamic for you to step away from that world and go into small to medium, maybe mum and dad businesses that you're buying? What
Yeah.
has changed the dynamic for you to shift thinking a little bit?
Yeah, look, I think a couple of things. Number one, obviously, financial markets changed. And again, profitability is more important today than any other time in the past. Um, and so that obviously in itself is an interesting concept, right?
Which is a good
Um,
reset, right? I think if we're not
mm,
building profitable businesses,
mm,
what do we have?
yeah,
Reality is they need to get to profitability at some point. Or you
mm,
have these thousand businesses chasing profitability and we'll to scale up and start up
mm,
and one gets there, two gets there. And
mm.
how much capital is basically burnt to get to that business that's
That's right.
profitable. So it's an
That's right.
interesting dynamic, the world of startup and scale up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
And so that's the thing. Like, I guess I was entrenched in that ecosystem, and when financial markets changed, obviously the focus has shifted.
Yep.
But then I also knew a few people in that space that have done phenomenally well in terms of the acquisition side, and started doing one, and then started doing two, three, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, it just becomes an easier thing to duplicate. I always
Definitely.
say, whether you do like $100 million deal, whether you do
Hmm.
a $200,000 deal, like the process is the same.
Is it? Oh, well.
Um,
Yeah.
it's the same, but um, it's not like one's harder than the other as such.
Hmm.
It's more that you've got more to risk at a bigger scale.
Got it.
Um, but I think if you know how to structure a deal or how to do it in a way that protects your downside and maximizes your upside, I think that's where the interesting part comes into play. Um, so yeah,
Who was around you that guided you through this period of transition to acquisition? Because sometimes it's the who that supports us.
yeah,
Jumping into something blind is
yeah,
difficult and a lot of failure. But was there
yeah.
someone around you that really supported you on that journey?
Yeah, look, there's a couple of people in my network
Yeah.
that I've seen them, develop over the past 5 years,
Hmm.
during quite difficult times when COVID happened and everything like that. But now I've seen them, what they've been able to achieve through business acquisition. Um, and it's really opened my mind into what's possible. Um, and so for me, having those people around just to understand what's going on and why it's more interesting, and actually tactically taking it on and doing things.
Hmm.
Um, those two. So again, there's no right or wrong, right? You're never going to know whether you're on the right path, but you get a
It's
feeling
very true.
for, you
Yeah.
get a feeling of whether you're on the right path, and by consulting with the right people and by um, talking with people who have experience, um, you can make better decisions.
What is so that I've started winding. I think you mentioned there's 14. Is that correct, or is that part of acquisition that you've been going through, or is that a
Well,
business ventures? Yeah.
look, some are startups,
Hmm.
some are more developed
Yeah.
businesses.
Okay.
But I'm a shareholder of about 14 companies at the moment,
Yeah.
and it's growing. I'm
Hmm.
about to do one of my largest deals I've ever done. So like things are,
Mm.
again, when you
Hmm.
say you're a shareholder of 14 companies, it doesn't mean I run all of them, obviously, because I wouldn't
No,
be
you
able to do
can't.
that.
So the
You can't,
reality
it's
is you must have
impossible.
good people in each, otherwise they're not going to work,
Correct.
right?
The
So
other thing you got to
that's
think about is the 80-20
yeah,
rule, right? Like
yeah.
20% is going to make you 80, and vice versa. So when people
Hmm.
start talking about, oh, you own 14 companies, da da da, like
Hmm.
it's not all rainbow and sunshines. Yeah. Majority of them don't do well. So
Yep.
you just got to work out, okay, what's doing well, what's not doing well, what do I need to cut out? I've
Hmm.
always had this, like 2 years ago, if you spoke to me, I was like,
Yeah,
oh, I'm going to have 100 businesses, companies by the age of
yeah.
40, right?
That's a that
But
was the goal. Yeah.
it's not about how many companies you have. It's about how big your
Mm.
business. I'd rather have one, $1 billion business than 100 $1 million business. Yeah. So,
Yep.
um,
Less headaches.
yeah, less
But
headaches.
there's one
Yeah,
operation, not the 100 to manage or to
yeah,
oversee, because you're not managing them technically. You'd have to have people in there.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think from my perspective, it's do things well, get
Hmm.
a good grasp, make sure it stabilizes, and then grow. You know,
Mm.
um, and always focus on when you're doing things like, okay, I'm
Hmm.
happy to take risk. Number one, it's got to be calculated. Number two is
Yep.
we're going to minimize the downside as much as possible. Um, and we've got to create a structure where we've got unlimited upside or close to unlimited upside, right?
Mm.
That's really,
That's what you're looking for when you go into that world.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
How do you assess a business to acquire, whether it be that $200,000 deal, couple of $1 million deal, whatever it is, doesn't really matter, right?
Yeah, yeah,
What are you looking for? Because you don't want something you're going to have to go in and manage, I'm assuming.
yeah.
What are you looking for?
Yeah, I think number one is you want to know how long the business has been running for and how long has it been profitable for, right? So fundamentally, the longer a business has been running successfully, the less or lower the chances are that it will go pear shaped, right?
Okay.
So, for
Makes sense.
example,
Yeah, we think about
Coca-Cola's,
that.
I don't know how
Yeah.
long Coca-Cola's been running for, but like the chances of Coca-Cola not doing well next year, for example, is much smaller than a afterpay scenario that's been going for 2 years, let's call it. You know,
Yep.
like that's the
Hmm.
reality of it. The more stable it is as a business. Number two is you want to know that it's fully under management, it's got the right people in there, and if not, can I put it
Hmm.
under management pretty easily through my network?
Got it.
Um, there's two scenarios, right? You buy a business that's under management, is profitable, it's doing well, been running well for 5 to 10 years or however long. Or you go, there's an opportunity to buy something that's underperforming, but I know how to turn it around pretty quickly and put it under management, So that's sort of like the space I'm playing in.
And do you care what the business does, or is it just at the end, here's the profitability, here's the number of years it's been profitable for, it's been running for 10 years, it's
Yeah,
been profitable for seven of those, and
yeah,
it's under management? Is that a tick, and then it's all about the art of the deal?
yeah. I think you want to know that, it's in a space that's going to be around in 10 to 15 years, right?
That's interesting to know right now what's going on with technology, right? In terms of what might get impacted significantly over the next 5 years.
You want to make sure that the industry is moving in the right direction, right? So,
It's
like
growing.
at the end of the
Mm,
day, you want to make sure that it's growing. Number one, and number two is it like you can sort of foresee, like if you brought a CD player to market today, it's not going to work, right? It's outdated. Yeah. Um,
correct.
so what I'm saying is, but like if a CD player has existed and you don't see for a long time and still exists, and you don't foresee any changes potentially in the next 10 years, because change doesn't happen overnight majority of the time, right? Like it takes time to evolve.
It does take years, yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Reality, yeah.
So I think you want to try and foresee what's going to happen. Number one. Number two is you want to know it's got a successful journey. Um, but what I really started looking for now is recurring revenue businesses,
Yep.
because you're not always like, yes, you're chasing
You're not
sales, but
chasing sales, but as
you've got
much,
existing
right?
revenue, right? It's
Yeah.
more stable. And then if it's got government funding, I think that's interesting, right? So like we're doing a play at the moment in childcare space, a deal out of Singapore, you know, pretty exciting. Obviously, high risk, high reward in the way that, but again, it's recurring revenue that is government backed, right? And the government's always supporting it better and all that kind of stuff. So again, we don't foresee, you know, a lot of changes in a negative way, right?
Not in the short to medium term. It's not going to happen in that space. You don't see it. Understood. Yeah.
So again, do I have experience in childcare? No.
Mm.
But do I know people that have the right people, uh, the right know-how to get it to where it needs to go? Yes. So as
Mm.
an entrepreneur, some of your, like, really what you should be doing is focusing on recruiting A players, like always, right?
Mm.
And bringing the right people to the right seats. It's almost like I talk about it like a puzzle. Yeah. You've got the ingredients, you've got the thing, your job is to put it together, right?
Yeah, to build the strategy around it, right? So, and who those people need to be in the seats. Because sometimes I'm assuming you're looking at acquisitions and the people in the seats aren't the right people and they're not working on the right things. They're not focusing on the right areas. And you
Mm.
think, if we just flip this, and this business could double in the next 2 years. So that's what you're looking for, really. Probably in an ideal scenario, you probably do you want the humming business that's just perfect sweet spot? Because you're paying obviously overs for that generally, I'm assuming. Or do you want the one that's a little bit underperforming with one or two tweaks? It could actually change the dynamic of what that business is returning.
I think it depends on, you know, where you're at. I mean, every deal is going to be different, and every deal is by deal basis.
Hmm.
Um, the fundamentals is like, how do we protect the downside and maximize the upside? Like that's my formula.
Hmm.
Um, and there's so many different ways to do that, right? Like, you know, I know for a fact there's a lot of people, that do a lot of big M&A deals that 90% of the time don't even use their own money, right?
Mm.
But it's okay because we're doing the right thing by everyone, right? So
Yeah, they're
it's a
technically
win-win.
investors coming in, right? I'm assuming how that works in structures. Yeah.
Yeah, and the investors, like at the end of the day, the investors do well, yeah. So everyone's happy. So I'm very big on that. Like one of my biggest thing, it has to be a win-win for everyone.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it just doesn't work. Yeah,
Oh, yeah, not long term, right? And if you want to continue those relationships and grow collectively, we're reality is business. We grow with people around us, and if we burn one person, then it becomes a bit stale with that environment. Then it becomes a bit of a challenge to make the next deal because people hear about that too. So reality is we want to make
reputation.
yeah, it's important to keep that up and do the best by everyone that you can. Stuff in business isn't going to go perfectly well all the time either, though. Stuff's not going to work all the time. So it's just how you communicate it. How do you actually continue to drive that relationship, even though this deal hasn't worked to what we expected? What do we do to turn it around? And just ensuring that we're trying the best we can all the time, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It's all about that.
Michael, there's a lot we could talk about, a lot of categories. I find it fascinating. You're from startup, and it's quite a good episode for people to think about. There's not just one way to do business.
That's right.
It's not just we need to build a unicorn business. What if you had 5, 10 businesses that were generating $100 million of revenue with a 15, 20% profit margin? That's a nice place to live from and create a good legacy for your family, etc. So
100%.
there are
Yeah,
many ways to skin the cat of business, and it's
absolutely.
interesting to learn for someone that's gone through all facets and landed where you are today.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And like I said, more than happy
Mm,
to have another conversation for your audience. I
yeah,
think it'd be very valuable
yeah.
just to talk about the acquisition piece and how to
Mm,
structure deals and stuff like that. Because I'm seeing over and over again,
yeah.
people don't really get it and don't know how to do it.
Mm, yep.
And I think it's a game changer if you had one skill to learn. Like that's a really valuable skill to have.
I'll take you up on
Deal,
that. We'll book another
yeah,
session in.
for sure.
Yeah, yeah,
And so, hopefully, there's some value in this to your audience because, again, it's all about being able to understand what we could have done better as youngins.
mm,
And I think if we
yeah.
can give that value, I think that's very positive.
No, brilliant, Michael. Thank you for coming on the DevReady Podcast today. A little bit of a twist of different ideas and philosophies around business and entrepreneurship in this. But I think it's important to have different perspectives because just
Yeah,
chasing that unicorn, like I said, is not the be all and end all. In reality, we're trying to get to a profitable, good business in the end.
yeah,
Yes, the unicorn might get you there, but there might be a better
yeah,
way that's not relying on VC funding all the way through and chasing
agreed.
revenue, i.e., the Openpay.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
No, awesome. Well, Andrew, thanks for having me.
I
We
really appreciate your
will
time
chat
today.
again and yeah, looking forward to future episodes.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael.
Cheers, Andrew. Bye.